Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Tuesday, January 13th, 2026, and today we are talking about if you need grow lights or heat lamps and what the pros use for their starts. We discuss newspapers as a mulch or assistant mulch, and we'll go out into the field and do a little soil block along. So let's do it. All right, everyone, welcome to Till Tuesday, your weekly reminder that you can get living soil compost and potting mixes from the bona fide nerds over there at Till Soil. For a little treat, check out Nathan on the Composter podcast, Season 4, Episode 3, or head to tillsoil.com to learn more. Also, hey, I just realized that this YouTube channel eclipsed 400,000 subscribers this week, so that's incredible. Seems like a big number of nerds. Like, if we all gathered in one place, it would be very nerdy. It'd also have to be a very big place. But shouts to that, and thank you to everyone who watches and or listens. Appreciate you. How is your week going where you are? We've been cold, so there's not a ton to be done, in the cold times. That's very interesting, at least. I'm just working on cutting out some saplings from our fences. Literally, that was my work yesterday, and it will be more of my work today. When you don't spray or, your fence rows or whatever, and you get a little bit behind on weed whacking, then things can get, a little bit wild. Generally speaking, I sort of love the wildness, but I'm feeling like maybe I should, rein it in a hair just to keep things under control. Otherwise, I don't have a ton to report from our end. Going to be a nice day here today, then very cold later this week, then looking nice again. It's January, you just won't settle down. So looking to stay busy outside today, getting that January list taken care of. Turns out that's much easier when stuff is not frozen to the ground all month. Also, I have a fun FA Cup update, a cup date as it were, that my team, Brighton and Hove Albion, will play Liverpool on Valentine's Day weekend. Why is that important, you might ask? Well, my wife is a Liverpool supporter, so one of us is getting an L for Valentine's Day. It's a bummer, it's got to be her, but sometimes that's love. All right, so I've got some Patreon question catch-up to do, which we're going to try and knock out over the next few weeks and take an extra Patreon question where we can fit them in. Now, that should not discourage Patreon members from asking more questions. Keep them coming. I will manage the answers to the questions. Y'all just bring the queries. So today, we're going to take an additional question to start the show. This one from Patreon member Thomas, who writes, quote, "What are some of the ways market gardeners grow their transplant starts? Are grow lights and heat mats for trays with potting mix the norm, or does the strategy shift once it gets to a certain scale? If lights are industry standard, what should I look for? If lights are a luxury, how do you get peppers and tomatoes started in the late winter light? Can't get enough of the podcast and loving the book so far. Cheers from 7B, Western North Carolina," end quote. All right, thanks and love the questions. So let's start with the first one. Are grow lights and heat mats the norm, or does the strategy shift once it gets to a certain scale? The answer there is there's really no norm. It almost certainly shifts when it gets to a certain scale, but there are a few common things that you will see as growers get bigger and bigger and more intensive. The first thing as growers start to scale up is that they will start using things like a germination chamber to start certain crops. These chambers can be made out of old refrigerators with a thermostat or just insulated cabinets of whatever sort. And effectively, what they do is enable the grower to set the heat and humidity just right for the crop that they want to germinate. Once the crop germinates, it can go out into the greenhouse or wherever there's light to grow into a full-blown transplant. Now, that doesn't mean growers won't also use heat mats or heating cables or whatever. For some growers, they might prefer not having to move the trays into the light once they germinate, like you would with a dark germ chamber. You do have to get them out of there, otherwise they get super leggy. Some growers will also start stuff indoors, and we do that sometimes in the early spring. Instead of building something special like, room temperature inside, then you would move that stuff outdoors onto heat mats, into the greenhouse or something when you're ready. And of course, some growers simply heat their greenhouses with propane or perhaps less commonly wood stoves. In effect, there is no one right way to do it, just whatever is the most efficient and easiest on your scale. For us, we start stuff on heat mats and then move them over, heating cables in a small, simple greenhouse. On super cold nights below 25 degrees Fahrenheit, or that would be like -3 Celsius, for more sensitive crops like early peppers and tomatoes, we will either have some house guests for the night, not preferred, or simply put a heater with them overnight. If you don't have electricity in your greenhouse, your options are limited for the really cold nights. Thermal mass, like water barrels, can only do so much, and composting comes with other risks. Like if you're trying to use the heat of the compost to heat up your tunnel, there could be other problems with that. Rocket heaters are somewhat of an option, and I know people who have had success using them, but the work required to maintain them overnight and all winter is not nothing. And if it fails, or you sleep through your alarm to go, restock it, or both, well, poof. So yeah, house guests. Now, you also asked about grow lights, and some growers do use them, like even in their greenhouses, and some don't. If you were really trying to push your season, really, really hard in the spring, and you plan to heat the space where you are growing, you could add lights to it for the early morning and later afternoon to speed things up. Or for instance, if you do have some quote unquote house guests, you could have a couple lights for getting them through cold, dark snaps when the greenhouse is just not heating up. The early tomatoes and peppers is a good question. We usually put them near a window with a couple very basic grow lights to help get them through. Like if it's really cold outside, it's cloudy, the greenhouse isn't warm, we'll keep them inside and we'll put them near a window with some grow lights. But during that period, we are not usually trying to necessarily like grow them per se, just to kind of keep them alive until the sun comes back and heats the greenhouse. And we're just trying to keep them from being too leggy. For us, in the earliest part of the spring, we simply try to time those sorts of crops so that the slow growth they have does match up with when we want to plant them. Does that make sense? Like, I don't really want to grow them too fast because I don't need them ready by February here. Like, I'm not going to try and do like heat mats in 24-hour sunlight to just get them really big, really fast. I shoot for the first week of April to put those into the tunnel. So I start them and move them around and protect them as needed, and usually starting in like February. Nothing crazy there. Because I don't really grow with lights at all, I don't want to advise too much on which ones to buy. I would just call a grower supply store and have them tell you how much space you need to have light for, and if it's to grow the plants or just like maintain them through cold snaps. I think those little details are important. It really just comes down to your space and budget, but I think it doesn't hurt to put your goals into a 5-year plan when you're planning your market garden. Like maybe you just start with what you can afford, but in the 5-year plan, you want to get a heated greenhouse, like up and running with additional grow lights, proper ventilation, built-in heating, well-made tabletops, all those things. Anyway, I hope there was something helpful in there. Listeners and viewers can feel free to add on. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, newspapers in this ecology, BRB. Today's episode is brought to you by High Mowing Organic Seeds. High Mowing Organic Seeds is celebrating their 30th anniversary with 48 fabulous new varieties for 2026. Highlights include downy mildew-resistant cucumbers, a poppy that looks like cotton candy, and 12 new tomato varieties. High Mowing offers more than 750 varieties of certified organic, non-GMO vegetables, flowers, herbs, and cover crops, all trialed for optimal performance in organic growing systems. High Mowing has the professional quality seeds and supportive grower reps to get you from seed to harvest. Visit highmowingseeds.com to request a catalog and use code 26NOTILL, all caps, for 10% off your order of $100 or more. That's highmowingseeds.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Ohio Earth Food. So you got your soil tested or need your soil tested, it's time to contact Ohio Earth Food. Since 1972, they have been growers' trusted source for organic soil amendments to apply before you plant to prevent those deficiency symptoms that limit production. Their knowledgeable staff have all been a part of certified organic operations and can help you choose the best products for your soil and deliver or ship them right to your farm. With locations in Northwest Ohio and just north of Madison, Wisconsin, Ohio Earth Food wants to be your partner for organic inputs. Don't count on luck this year. Start your seeds in the Seed Catapult potting soil and put their Revita fertilizers in your beds, and rest assured that your plants will have all the nutrients, stimulants, and energy for whatever comes their way. Feed your soil and let your soil feed the plants. Visit them at ohioearthfood.com. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but as you can tell, I get lots of Patreon questions, and I will always get to them. Now, today's second Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Caroline Scully, who writes, quote, I'm starting new garden beds on my lawn with layers, Western Massachusetts, Zone 5B. I don't want to use plastic and definitely do not want to remove the sod or till. I'm too old and wise for that. I'm using newspaper as the first layer, but our local paper has a lot of colored pages. I'm only using the regular newspaper pages, not the glossy ones. My quick research suggests that colored inks on newsprint these days are safe, but do you know more about this? I'm putting down in this order, a couple layers of newspaper, wood chips, some small sticks, hay, my own great compost, and then a couple layers of composted horse or donkey manure. I'll probably plant a legume like field peas in the early spring and then use the beds in the summer for beans and or peas. I'm assuming the soil layers may be low in nitrogen due to all the woody material. Most likely, the layers will all be frozen for most of the winter. My new beds may not be great for the first year, but I'm hoping for something. I have had success with similar methods in the past. Any suggestions, feedback, and or ideas for what to plant the first year? End quote. Okay, so fun question here. There are actually quite a few things to touch on. First is the newspaper and colored ink question. Generally speaking, I suggest avoiding colored inks, but definitely glosses like you are. Some may be perfectly fine, but especially with those glosses, some will likely contain things like PFAS, forever chemicals that you don't want to purposely add to your gardens. Good that you're kind of steering away from that. Sticking with the black and white inks, non-glossy ones is generally recommended. Now, if it's matted, non-glossy inks, I'm not going to suggest you use that material, but that concerns me quite a bit less. These days, like you said, those inks are fairly non-toxic, often made with vegetable oils. They may contain some petroleum products. They may also contain some small amount of heavy metals, sometimes used for certain pigments, like everyone's favorite pigment, the exotically named cadmium yellow, but not likely enough to be an issue unless you are using tons of this stuff, which it sounds like you are not. Now, colored inks are still not permitted in certified organic farming, so just not a tool or like certified organic growers can use, but on a small scale, I think it's largely fine. And I like the layers idea. I might break up the carbons a little bit if it were me, like with the compost, more lasagna-y style. So a little bit of carbon, a little bit of compost, little carbon, little compost. But either way, with enough time, it should be good to go. I think your instinct to plant a cover crop in the spring as the first crop is a good idea. It might, however, not quite be ready to roll for great production by the early summer, maybe more like mid to late summer would be my guess. But truthfully, that does depend on how deep you go with the compost layers and what crops you're talking. If you have 8 inches or more of compost, most shallow rooted crops will likely do fine that first year. That would be like the squash family, lettuces, peas, beans, onions, spinach, kale, chard. Maybe even carrots may do fine. You'd be surprised. Some of the deeper rooted crops like tomatoes and peppers, it's hard to say. I would probably not shoot for those my first season. With the roots running into those wood chips, I don't have a ton of confidence that those crops would be super happy, at least not at first. You really never know, though. It depends a bit on how warm your winter is, how coarse the wood chips are, how good the compost is, etc. Obviously, a lot of nuances to your situation there, but I hope something in there was helpful and maybe keep us abreast at how it goes and what worked and what didn't. Even better, and this goes for anyone and everyone, please always feel free to send a 20-second farm video clip over here to farmermike@notillgrowers.com, and we can share those here on the show. I get the impression Mike and I are not the only ones who have enjoyed seeing your farms and gardens, so send them along. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to head out to the field. Like for real, though. I mean, I am. You're going to join me. Be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds. Johnny's Selected Seeds is a proud supporter of Growers Daily. At Johnny's, they do more than sell seeds. They grow them. They trial them to see how they perform on Johnny's research farm in Maine and across the U.S. and Canada. Only the best varieties are added to their catalog and website. When you need proven varieties you can count on and detailed guidance from seedling to harvest, consider Johnny's your trusted growing partner. JohnnySeeds.com. That's JohnnySeeds.com. All right, back to the show. Okay, then we're going to do something just a little bit different today. So every Tuesday, I want to end with a little tool focus. But last week, I was doing some soil blocks, and I thought, why not bring you along with me, and you can, like see the process and some of the nuances to it. I'd like to incorporate this sort of style of segment in the future if it works. So let me know what you all think, and if it's helpful, or if you're like, maybe that wasn't very fun to watch or listen to. Let me know. Especially you podcast only folks. This may not be as fun or helpful for you, but let me know. All right, I'll meet you in the greenhouse. Hey you all, I thought we would do something a little bit different today. We're gonna do a little soil block along, which means I'm gonna make some soil blocks, a few different types, and I'm gonna show you how it's done on each different type and some of the little nuances. If you're listening on podcast form, I have no idea if this is gonna be interesting or not. It's gonna be a little noisy, maybe, but I'm gonna try and explain stuff visually as much as I can. Anyway, let's start with the key part of making soil blocks, which is the soil mix itself. In my opinion, without question, the number one thing people mess up about soil blocking is the moisture level. They get it too dry more often than not, which means that they just sort of crumble. You want it kind of the consistency of oatmeal is what they say, just where you can squeeze a lot of moisture out of it. What I always say is you want at least 1 or 2 good little puddles in the bottom. And that way you can kind of mix. Like if it's super wet in one spot, you can use some of the drier stuff, but you really just want to mix it really well until you get just a couple of these little puddles here. Before you make your soil blocks, you can kind of mix it up, but you want those kind of, just those little puddles. So I'm going to show you a couple different types. This one is the Lundberg 4-block soil blocker that I got from Johnny's somewhere around 100 years ago, give or take, by the looks of it. And this one, you know, they come in 4, and I think we have a 6-block maker. They also do a single block maker. And this is how it works. Basically, when you're using these hand blockers, the easiest thing I've found is to use the side of your barrel to kind of just press all the soil mix in there that you can, right? You're just using the side, you're putting pressure there, trying to get as much as you can, right? And then you're sort of just scraping off the bottom, making it nice and flat like that. And then taking one of these soil trays, these are the Johnny soil block trays. I don't know, they're the tall ones that we've used for years. And then you're basically just, right here, you're just depressing it and then pulling out, just like that. And you get 4 nice blocks, super easy, super simple. So that's the hand blocker. Then you have something like the standing blocker, which is a little bit different. With the standing blocker, instead of using the side, I'm gonna use the bottom. So I'm basically just pushing that mix in there as best I can, pushing it firm against the bottom, wiggling it back and forth a little bit. You know that it's not too wet if you can lift it up and out, just like that. And then I put it on the soil tray, and I'm gonna move this up here so you can see it. And then it has this little plunger at the top. I'm just gonna push down a little bit like this way and depress that plunger and kind of just work it out gently, right? And then that way you get these nice, in this case is a 35 block maker, so you get 35 nice blocks, just like that, pretty fast. The one thing with both the hand blocker and the 35 block soil blocker is that you, after each or every couple, you should dip it in a bucket of water. It just makes it go faster, gives it almost some lubrication. This is the same thing with the soil. You want it wet enough that those blocks will fall out, but not that they'll melt, right? If they're melting on the tray, they're too wet. If they're just like crumbling on the tray, they're too dry. Your first one should be a good indicator of how well you've mixed your soil mix. But dipping it in water will help them all come out. So I'm gonna demo the Swift blocker real quick, which makes this one makes the 200 blocks. It's from Swift Blocker, one of my favorite tools that's come out over the last few years, and I use it all the time. So we're gonna do that real quick. I have same tray. Sorry again for the podcast listeners if this is not interesting. This one gets really scrapey, so just fair warning. So I'm taking the lid off. I put the bottom in the tray, it fits perfectly. Now, next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna load this up with soil mix. The one nuance here is that I use this bench scrape like you'd get from a Baker Supply company or something. This is just gonna help me get the mix into all the crevices, especially those corner blocks, and then scrape it off and put it back in the wheelbarrow. And then I'm gonna use the top to depress the soil blocks out. So here's what that looks like. I am loading it up currently with soil mix if you're listening on podcast form. I have no idea what that sounds like to you. And then I'm going to scrape it in, try and pack it into those corners, kind of go back and forth the bottom of the bench scrape. And then the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna scrape this excess off, right? And the biggest thing with scraping the excess off is you wanna make sure there are no sticks sitting on top of the actual grid, because that will clog the Swift blocker. It'll make it impossible to really plunge them out well. So the cleaner that is, the easier. And then we're gonna put the top on. Right? We're gonna go back and forth, just like so. Takes a little bit of muscle in your hands, but after a while you get hang of it, and you just go back and forth until it comes all the way to the top. You're gonna pick it up, tap both sides, and then just lift. And there you are, 200 blocks. All right, I hope you all enjoyed that. Let me know what you think or any questions you have. I can always do these in the field ones, and I'm gonna make probably several bazillion of these this year, so I'm happy to come back and revisit this subject. Otherwise, when we come back, I have no idea. Whatever Farmer Jesse planned for you. It'll probably be awesome, or at least nerdy. All right, I hope that was at least a little bit interesting, fun. Let us know if you like that sort of in the field segment in the comment section here at No Till Growers YouTube channel, or message me at patreon.com/no-till-growers. Patreon members, you can always do that. Otherwise, I think that's it for this Tuesday. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor this show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at no-tillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and also my wife Hannah for everything in the world. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of January, you get a shout on the show. So big shout outs today to Sweet View Farm. Shouts to you, Sweet View. Oh, that rhymed. Nailed it. All right, so our story this week takes place at a farm high school, and the whole mission with this school is to create farmers. As we kind of discussed yesterday, there were just almost none left anymore. The reason for that, as young Max is learning in farm history class, is that a long time ago, farmers started to age out. That was the first thing. Young people were no longer wanting to farm because farming was mostly automated anymore and just wasn't very fun or interesting or lucrative. Then you had the issue of land prices. You know, data centers, all these things were just driving land prices up and often ruining water and that sort of stuff. So a lot of people just were kind of done with farming. And then a lot of people realized they could make a lot more money selling the land to large corporations than farming it themselves, and so they did that. Then the automation improved to the point that the physical farmer was somewhat of a novelty and somewhat obsolete, and was largely replaced by engineers who could manage thousands and thousands of acres of equipment pretty much remotely. And then, Max learned, came the blight. A type of blight no one had ever seen or foreseen. Farming ceased, all of it, and that is for tomorrow on Farm of the Past. I don't know why I said it that way, but you probably do. I don't know why I said that either. All right. Thanks for watching and or listening. We'll see you then. Bye.